Linen was lying on the bed. His eyes were closed and one hand was resting on his chest. He opened his eyes and frowned slightly, saying that it seemed like he was right, and the person he was fighting was a member of the Demon Association. He was extremely dangerous and he was unstoppable. Linen remembered the way they fought. A huge spider monster opened its mouth, ready to attack the young man while Linen stood opposite him and defended himself. Linen closed his eyes again and thought about the fact that it was necessary to contact his teacher as soon as possible. He told the system that he needed to enter another dimension, and a purple glow enveloped Linen. A moment later, Linen was standing in front of a tower surrounded by various buildings, and a huge-sized eye was hanging in the sky, illuminating everything around it with a red light and looking directly at Linen below him. Linen's wrist and a blue system window opened in front of him with his message, which read, "Teacher, please return to the pharmacy." Linen frowned and realized that his last message had never been answered by his teacher, and was he really not in this dimension at all? A system window popped up, displaying the following information. Information Bureau, yesterday, there was another powerful monster invasion in Wandering Soul Alley. The intruder is believed to be an association of demons and their new biological weapon. The local intelligence group is tracking down the monster in real time, although the battle has ended. Also, one of the participants in the battle is the apprentice of the great teacher, Bloodsaw. Click to start the game. The residents of Wandering Souls Alley are asked to stay off the streets temporarily to prevent terrible events from happening. Several other creatures are suspected in the crime. The famous evil queen and the apprentice of the Bloodsaw Linen. To watch the fight, you have to pay 30 skull coins. Linen frowned slightly as he read the contents of the text completely. This was impossible. Had all the information about their battle really been made public in this manner? The doctor extended his index finger and clicked on the blue box in front of him. A system notification popped up that -30 skull coins had been debited from his account. When he opened the window, he saw himself and how he fought on top. Just below that, the statistics of views, likes and comments. And below the broadcast comments from various people. "It's really that doctor, I recognized him." Linen arched an eyebrow as he read everything written in front of him. The young man thought to himself, is there really a video recording? And was there anyone else outside at that very moment? He frowned slightly and saw that there was also a video of two bald guys fighting each other, and it was filmed by the same person who filmed their fight. Linen saw on the blue screen a mark of 3,000 viewers. It costs 30 skull coins to view a video. 3,000 people viewed it, so that means the guy who recorded their fight got 90,000. If he posted videos like this more often, he would definitely earn a lot of money. Linen smiled as he continued to type something with his finger and frowned slightly, thinking that was it possible that there was such an industry that specialized in sharing information in this world. Linen continued to quickly type something on the screen, continuing the thought that maybe there was some information about the teacher and just need to find out who posted this particular clip, and then he could find it. A dialog box appeared on the screen. User 204. Personality, information seller. Activity, data transfer, sharing and selling information from the dark world. The protagonist told the system to activate the transmission system. Linen found himself in a small wooden room with 2 chairs and a table with a lamp on it. The lamp was glowing brightly, casting a shadow from itself. Standing against the wall was a figure wrapped in a hooded cloak. Folding his hands in a lock, the information merchant asked him what he needed. The protagonist asked if he was selling information. The merchant replied that was correct and he was a scout who was investigating Area 900. His face was gray and covered in spikes, with 2 large fangs visible from his lower jaw. His 3 large eyes, haphazardly placed on his face, reflected the protagonist. The merchant said he could provide him with all the valuable information about the area for a fee. Looking around, Linen said the place is quite cool. The information merchant's mouth opened unnaturally, and he said that he was caught in a parallel information network that he got from the server, and each of his clients gets into a separate network space. He said right now he was receiving 754 clients at the same time. Linen said with a smirk that he would like to purchase some information from him, but their deal depended on him having the appropriate sources of information. The merchant asked him to ask his questions. The smile disappeared from the protagonist's face and he asked his first question with a serious face. Did he know the exact location of Bloodsaw? The merchant looked at Linen's face through the candle flame. Pointing his index finger at him, he said that it would cost 50 black metal coins. Clutching his head, Linen jumped up from his seat and exclaimed in astonishment. The merchant said that the information about this object had skyrocketed in demand, and accordingly, the price had also increased 50 times because the object was being tracked in real time. He told the protagonist that he wasn't the only one who wanted to know the coordinates of the blood saw. Frowning, Linen asked if the one who was also looking for his teacher was from the Demon Association. He said, "It looks like the teacher is in a dangerous situation." The protagonist asked a second question. How can one quickly contact a particular creature over a long distance? The merchant replied that the methods depend on the distance, and their price starts from 100 skull coins, and can end up to 100,000 black metal coins. He said that he could choose the method that suited the cost. Linen gave him 100 skull coins. The merchant said, according to the payment, the fastest way to contact a creature at a great distance is through vision, a mirror world that is superimposed on the dark world. He said, due to the teleportation function, a creature who entered the mirror world at will could communicate with him. They looked at each other in silence for a while. The merchant said that he had given his answer and that was the end of it. Linen asked what he should do. Angrily pointing his finger at him, he asked if this information was worth 100. He asked why he should ask him if he could already move to the mirror world. The protagonist stomped his foot on the table. The merchant said that he chose the cheap method himself. Linen sat back in his chair, clenched his fist, and asked about the whole cost thing. He asked him the same question again, but this time he paid 1 black metal coin. The system alerted that he had spent 1,000 skull coins. The merchant said, according to the payment, but may hire a personal courier to deliver letters over long distances, depending on the rates of such a courier. He said, there is a slight difference in the speed of sending letters, and they also have their own sending company, and he can choose from them. The salesman put a piece of paper on the table. On the piece of paper were the resumes of several couriers, one of which was a tortoise king. Possesses strong armor, so he is considered the most protected in the dark world. It guarantees the integrity of the parcel, is stable in its work. The delivery failure rate delivers 0%. Ranks at the top of the list for information security every year. Rubbing his chin thoughtfully, Linen said that the Tortoise King sounds the most reliable, so he chooses it. The merchant said that they have a spot reserved for him in the dispatch queue, and they currently have 5 available turtle couriers. Defect rate 0%, speed 1 meter per hour. Interrupting him, the protagonist asked about the 1 meter per hour. The merchant explained, since they are a specially trained breed, their speed is 10 times faster than their congeners, and the royal turtle he ordered has held the record in the walking competition among royal turtles in their organization for years, and no turtle has been able to beat it yet. Linen clutched his head in astonishment and thought about how he had wasted 1,000 coins. He wondered why he had a feeling that he came to a fraud's shop. The protagonist sat silently with his lips pressed together and his eyebrows lowered. His eyebrow twitched nervously, and he asked if they had anything more reliable. The merchant said that there were only 4 types of couriers currently available, but they were trying to learn new ways, and if he didn't like something, they could serve him later. Linen sank into thought with a gloomy face. Raising an eyebrow, he asked if it meant that the royal turtle was reliable but characterized by slowness. The merchant nodded in response, looking at him with bulging red eyes. The protagonist raised another eyebrow and asked about the jumper being fast but could die at any moment. The merchant nodded again, his eyes looking in different directions. Linen raised 2 fingers and asked to book these 2 couriers for him because he needed them urgently. The merchant's eyes flashed with a blue light and he agreed. A piece of paper with a glowing red eye appeared on the table. The merchant announced that the couriers had been successfully booked and now he needed to provide his address in the dark world. He said they would ship everything as quickly as possible, and since it was a biological contract, it could not be traded in the mirror world. The protagonist looked at the contract, frowning. The trader pointed the finger of a hand with a long fingernail at the paper and told him not to worry because they didn't divulge their customers' information. He told him to write his address. Linen agreed and thought he believed him but would write his neighbors' addresses in case he was scammed. He wrote the address on the paper with a bone-like fountain pen. A blue light illuminated the contract and it disappeared from the table. The merchant billed him for the delivery service 2,600 skull coins. He said the couriers would go to his place immediately after payment. Linen asked if he hadn't already paid 1,000 coins. The merchant said that was the consultation fee, but now he has to pay for the courier service, and it's a separate fee. Linen silently frowned. Blazing with anger, he thought that this store was a total fraud. The system alerted that he had spent 2,600 skull coins. The merchant, bowing, said that payment had been received. He told him to expect within 2 hours and the documents would be delivered to him. He thanked him for choosing them. The protagonist slowly closed his eyes. Scratching his head, Linen said that this guy was still asleep. His hand slept with his mouth open. Putting on his white jacket, the protagonist thought that he couldn't believe that he was sleeping after everything that happened. He thought, if he wasn't useful to him, he would have killed him long ago. Linen stepped onto the grass-covered ground. There was silence around the ruined house whose windows showed blue eyes. The protagonist snuck inside through a large hole in the wall. Linen said that everything was quiet in the place, and all that was left was to wait for the couriers. The waiting tired him out, so he decided to see what the system had sent him last night. An image of a sword appeared on the dialogue box in front of him. The sword appeared in his hand, shrouded in red energy. Night Demon Knife. Type, scalpel. Characteristic, legendary item. Effect, never wears out. A half-meter-long scalpel, more suited for human surgery. One has absolutely no problem in assisting those who are not, as superior knife skills often reflect the conduct of operations. Legend has it that at night, it can change good intentions into evil intentions and become sharper. Linen examined the sword in amazement and asked if it was an operating scalpel. He said that it was easier to use it to harm patients than to heal. Smirking, the protagonist decided that this scalpel was more suited for chopping meat, and he kept it in case he had to defend himself. 2 books appeared in his hands. The Night Doctor's Mission Map. Legendary item. A map of the night doctors that roam the darkness. Caring surgeons, their goal is to make all patients happy. They wish to help all living beings and rid them of diseases, so it is better to be sick when you meet them. Otherwise they will not be happy. Random diagnosis technique. Legendary item. Diagnose an organism with up to 20 diseases. It must be sick. It needs to be diagnosed. Linen said, it seems like the Night Doctor mission card is an item to switch to a new profession. He decided that the random diagnosis technique was more suitable for unscrupulous doctors, not him. One of the books disappeared from the protagonist's hand, and he shifted his eyebrows in astonishment. Linen frowned, and the system notified him that he had mastered a new skill, random diagnosis technique. Random diagnosis technique is divided into active and passive triggering with 2 effects. Passive triggering can quickly make several random diagnoses for a patient, determine the disease, and take tissue analysis. Active use focus on the patient's condition. You can detect 1 to 20 diseases this way. This power worsens the mental state. The diagnosis of the patient depends on the patient's condition, physical and mental health. Closing his eyes, Linen said that being able to detect patients' diseases in a second is wonderful. Imagining himself swimming in money, he said with a smirk that identifying a disease and treating it is just an endless stream of money. The good and bad sides of his personality argued amongst themselves about it. The evil part of the protagonist wanted easy money, while the good part told him that he had a conscience and shouldn't do this. Hearing the alert sound, Linen glanced at the dialogue box. Passive diagnosis. Diseases detected. Stomach disorder, phimic phobia, addiction, gene mutation. Smirking, the protagonist exclaimed that he could recognize all diseases at a glance, and this passive ability was the best skill for doctors. Looking at the mouth on his palm, Linen wanted to try out the active skill on him. Closing his eyes, he said that it had been with him all this time, and he couldn't just use it as a test subject. The protagonist remembered how the mutant in his hand had tried to eat him, and frowning, he began to hesitate. Sighing, he closed his eyes. Laughing evilly, Linen said that he would make him suffer. He opened his eyes wide, and the system made a ringing sound. The main character's hand woke up and said he had a headache and was feeling a little nauseous. Trying to figure out what was happening to him, he assumed he had eaten something wrong, but decided he hadn't. The system alerted the protagonist that it had diagnosed a random illness in the patient, morning sickness. Apparently it's a symptom that manifests during pregnancy, but for some reason was found in the left arm. Inexplicably, he felt dizziness and nausea, loss of appetite, and abdominal bloating. Raising his eyebrows upwards, Linen looked at his hand, which clenched its lips, trying to hold back the gagging. Vomit poured out of the hand's mouth. With a smirk, the protagonist said that he would kill him another time. Nausea came up to the protagonist's throat. He covered his mouth with the palm of his hand, holding back the gagging. Frowning and sweating profusely, Linen asked what was going on because he was also nauseous. He exclaimed that he had completely forgotten that he shared the same body, and it was his own fault. His tongue dangled exhaustively from the mouth of his hand. Linen opened the bottle of blue potion and, holding back nausea, told his hand that he had asked him not to eat so much. He told the hand to drink this medicine and rest. Vomit continued to come out of the hand's mouth. Breathing heavily, the hand told it not to even think about thanking him. It said it would eat him as soon as it got the chance. The system notified the protagonist that the left hand's favor towards him had improved by 2 points. Linen started pouring blue liquid into his hand's mouth with an annoyed told him to talk nonsense and start drinking. The system reported that the left hand's attitude towards him had undergone some changes, and although it hated him, it was still grateful to him. The protagonist was sitting in a building in the dark, waiting for his package. Hearing a rustle, he opened his eyes. The wind was fluttering the cloth noisily. A monster covered in blisters said he had brought the package. Lin jumped down on the floor in front of him. The monster asked if he was Xuan Wu. The protagonist calmly said that it was him. Bringing his face close to his face, the monster sniffed. After confirming his identity, he said that there was no problem. He put his hand on his head. Removing the top of his head, the monster pulled out a small chest. Handing it to the protagonist, he asked him to sign for receipt. Lin opened the chest with a creak. On the paper was written instructions. Open the scroll, use your blood to sign. This way you will formalize a contract of employment. After completing these steps, you will be contacted by our manager. Please write your name on the back of the card and hand it to the courier to make sure your item is successfully received. The monster handed the protagonist a feather. Lin took the quill from his hand and noticed an alert from the system. Diseases detected. Aged rheumatism. Dreadful poison corrodes the body. Intra-abdominal cyst. The protagonist, frowning, looked at the monster. The monster asked him to sign because he wants to return to his life. Lin, pointing his finger at the monster, said that he had recently started to feel stomach pain and chills. Gritting his teeth, he said that walking made his knees ache, gave him goosebumps, and made him want to cry when he looked at his reflection in the mirror. The monster wondered in shock how he knew about this. Remembering how he had recently stood near huge bones sticking out of the ground, he tensed up. The monster asked what he was doing. He frightenedly wondered if he had met some crazy stalker. Lin thoughtfully and calmly told him that he didn't have long to live. The monster exclaimed in surprise with tears from his eyes. The protagonist stroked his shoulder with a mad grin and told him not to worry. He said he was a professional, so he would live to see the morning, because he could see his illnesses without even touching him. Lin said that his illness was very serious and if not treated, he would be paralyzed and die. He said that even after healing and regular visits to the doctor, the effects would haunt him for the rest of his life. The monster asked fearfully what he should do and if he could help him. Lin said, of course. He said they were destined to meet, and he would do his best to save him. The protagonist grinned. They left the building, and Lin told the monster to follow him because they were near his pharmacy. He told him not to worry because he wouldn't charge him much. The monster sat silently in the chair while the protagonist rummaged through the drawer. He wondered how he ended up at the doctor's office if he had come here to drop off a package. The monster thought he had seen his illnesses in one glance, and maybe he was a miracle doctor. It seemed to him that he was like a messenger, a gift from above. Lin asked him to lift his leg. The monster didn't understand, but straightened his leg. The protagonist hit his knee with a large hammer and he cried out in pain. The ghost's mental state was -10. Lin asked if he was in pain. The ghost grabbed his knee and said it hurt 10 times more than it did before. The protagonist said that the pain is understandable to him, and the root of the illness is this. He said that he was suffering from senile rheumatism triggered by the poison, and if it continued like this, sooner or later he would die. The ghost said fearfully that such severe pain had never been experienced before, and he must have bruised himself. He asked if he had hit him hard. The protagonist said no. Pointing his finger at the ghost, he said that the fact that the soreness comes from the bone is evident without hitting him. The ghost sadly and fearfully said that it's not that bad. Lin angrily pounded the table and asked if he knew how many patients had driven themselves to death just because of that negligent attitude towards their health. He asked if he could imagine what it was like to have a disease eating away at his entire body. The ghost remained silent with his mouth open. The protagonist, looking him over from all sides, told him that he might not feel it at first, like an ant crawling over his body. The ghost's face contorted into a frightened grimace. Lin ran his finger along the knife blade with a smile and said, then the pain would build up, like a knife cutting through flesh. He touched one of the blisters on the ghost's body with the knife. The protagonist told him in his ear that one cut would be followed by another, and the tumor would become like a meatball that would explode if touched. The ghost asked him to cure him. He told him not to say a word and he would do whatever he said. Lin handed him a bloodletter patch for his tendons and told him to use one 3 times a day. He handed him another medicine and a piece of paper and told him that it was the best option for rheumatism. He said that these 2 kilograms of medicine should be boiled and drunk once a day for 7 days. Lin handed him a jar of blue liquid with something floating in it and said it was a food supplement. He told the ghost to take it if he felt weak in the morning. The protagonist handed him some medicine for his appetite and for his kidneys. Holding the medicines in his hands, the ghost asked if the medicines were too much for him. Lin, frowning, said that these were medicines only for rheumatism, and there were other diseases he had not yet told him about. The ghost, trembling, asked if there were more. The protagonist sat down in a chair, putting his foot on his leg, and asked if he had been feeling chills all over for the past few days, and if the cold was coming from inside, from his stomach and all over his body. The ghost said no and asked how he saw it. He exclaimed, "It can't be," Linen said, throwing his head back. According to his primary analysis, he had probably been poisoned by a malignant poison, and this lesion had caused a malignant cyst to appear in his stomach. He turned around abruptly, holding a large knife in his hand. The main character smiled ominously and said, "We need to cut open his stomach and see if there was a cyst there." Lying on the operating table, the ghost asked if he thought this scalpel in his hand was too big. Looking at his reflection in the blade, Linen told him not to worry because he was a professional at his job and the bigger the knife, the better. Swinging the knife with the blade downwards, he said, "He will start." The ghost, raising his palms, asked him to wait. Linen, looking at him questioningly, asked what. The ghost asked if he was going to do it without anesthesia. The protagonist looked at him wide-eyed. The monster asked if it wasn't okay to anesthetize the wound. He asked how he could have forgotten about it. Linen, scratching the back of his head awkwardly, apologized for his bad memory and told him not to worry. The system alerted the ghost's mental state deteriorated by 20 points. The protagonist was fidgeting with his drawers, and the ghost said that he didn't seem to know how to make anesthesia, and there was something wrong here. He asked if this man wasn't a professional doctor. Linen pulled out a small vial of black liquid with a smile. The ghost exhaled. The protagonist said, "The expiration date has expired." The monster tensed up upon hearing this. Linen asked with a smile if he would tolerate it. The ghost fearfully refused and said that even a hammer blow on his knee hurt him and he would die from the pain. He asked what they would do. Rubbing his chin thoughtfully, the protagonist said there was another way, but he didn't know if he would want to try it. With a sinister grin, he held up a finger and said, "Physical anesthesia." The ghost asked in fear, "Physical anesthesia." Linen took the wooden object in his hand. System alert, you were able to find an approach to the ghost. Reward, 10 base experience points. The protagonist hit the ghost on the back of its head, shattering the wooden object into splinters. Grinning, Linen swung the knife with the blade down over the unconscious ghost lying there with foam coming out of its mouth. Looking at him with narrowed pupils, with a look reminiscent of madness, he urged him to remain calm. The silhouette of Linen could be seen in the window, working a knife over the ghost's body. System alerts, you have successfully removed the cyst from the ghost. Your surgical ability is +10. Your night demon knife dealt 100 points of damage to the ghost's internal organs. Your knife skills +1. You have successfully stopped the ghost's internal bleeding. Your healing ability is +1. You have completed surgery on the ghost's abdomen. Your healing ability is +1. You have straightened the ghost's crooked waist. Your healing ability is +1. You have successfully sutured the wound. Your ability to close wounds is +10. The ghost opened its eyes, leaving the operating room, holding an IV in his hand and holding his hand on his abdomen covered with bandages. He said awestruck that he had the cyst removed. Linen with a good-natured smile told him that he had removed the cyst, but the poison remained and needed to be neutralized. He said it was a new potion he had prepared for him, and it needed to be taken in time for a week, after which he could stop taking the medicine. The ghost took the coil from his hands. After thanking him, he wished his family much happiness. The protagonist replied that he had just done his duty and all he had to do was to pay the cost of this treatment, which was 3,000 skull coins. He asked, "Cash or collateral?" The ghost replied, "Cash." He placed 3 coins on the table. Linen thanked him. The ghost handed him a paper and said he still hadn't signed the delivery papers. He asked him to sign them. After opening the chest, the protagonist asked him to wait for a while. He touched the contents of the chest and heard the system alert. You have detected diseases, congenital paralysis of high degree, frequent skin discharge, residue of malignant toxin left by a parasitic poison moth. Linen wondered in amazement why his passive skill suddenly worked. Finding a hair in the trunk, he lifted it in front of his face. The protagonist said that there was no problem, but he had one question. He asked if anyone had touched that hair. The ghost said no, and his master sends everything one by one, personally packaged, and no one else could touch it. Grinning evilly in his thoughts, Linen thought that this was the same intelligence agent, and he seemed to be suffering from various ailments, which was not surprising since he was constantly in the spotlight for intelligence work. He said with an unchanging smile, "I know." Taking a quill in his hand, the protagonist signed the document. He wrote a letter on the same piece of paper. "Dear informant, I have received your letter. Thank you very much. However, it seems you accidentally dropped your hair at the post office, and I am a doctor who has determined some strange symptoms from your hair. I am deeply saddened by your pain. If you are reading this letter, please visit Mr. Xuanmu at 20th Century Pharmacy. Don't forget to make an appointment and bring money. I can make an appointment for you, further diagnosis, and then give you treatment. I wish you good health, your faithful Dr. Xuanmu. Lin En thought with a smile that he had cheated him several times, so he would have to thank him well this time. He gave the paper to the ghost and the ghost thanked him and said that it was his responsibility. The protagonist asked to give this contract to his master. He said that he was very happy with this package. Looking at the piece of paper, the ghost thought in amazement that it was a recommendation for his master, and he had diagnosed him with a bunch of dangerous diseases just by a single hair. Turning around, he decided to hurry up and go about his business, or else he would find more diseases in him. With a wave of his hand, Lin En said goodbye to the patient. The ghost's face contorted in fear, and he quickly ran out of the pharmacy. Dipping the quill in ink, the protagonist said, "It's time to get to work." Through a window covered with cobwebs, Lin En could be seen writing something on paper. He wrote a letter, "Dear Zio Zio, I am your personal physician, Lin En. Not long ago, you became our first lifetime client, which makes me feel extremely happy. You are a very nice and friendly girl. Since you left, I have been thinking about you, waiting to see you day and night, tossing and turning in my sleep and losing a lot of weight. It reminds me again of our wonderful night. The longing in my heart has become unbearable, and I have decided after much deliberation to write you a letter today, for I feel that if I do not do so I shall die. You are like a ray of pale moonlight in my soul. I really can't stop thinking about you. So, will you accept my proposal? I especially invite you to come to our alley tomorrow. I'll prepare a sumptuous dinner for you. Please don't refuse. I miss you." Satisfied with his letter, the protagonist said, "The only thing left is to send this letter to Zio Zio." He put the letter in an envelope. Taking out a scroll from the chest, Lin En unrolled it on the table. The paper showed two intersecting triangles with an eye in the middle. The protagonist said, "After all, this is the most powerful person he knows, and maybe she can help find his teacher." He bit his finger. Lin En dripped his blood onto the paper and the triangle began to glow. A bright light illuminated the room. The protagonist looked in front of him in shock. He saw a black dog covered in red patterns. Beast of Darkness, level 80. Aggressiveness, neutral. Combat ability, run away from it as fast as possible. A strange creature that wanders in the darkness. If you notice a large group of meteors flying across the sky, please do not hesitate. These are groups of wild beasts that dwell in the darkness. The dog, shrouded in red energy, quickly spun his head around, looking around. A huge green turtle appeared in the room. The turtle looked to the side. Rotten Turtle King, level 81. Combat abilities, hard to tell. Introduction. Turtle Kings live in a huge rotten swamp. Quiet and slow, spend the absolute majority of their lives sleeping. For thousands and tens of thousands of years, they live by themselves. Lin En asked if they were his couriers. The darkness beast's tongue dangled from its mouth, and it made an incomprehensible sound of reply. The turtle spoke very slowly. The protagonist looked at it in awkward anticipation. With a sigh, the turtle finally said it his courier. The protagonist exhaled and said he thought he was going to die. Placing a hand on his forehead, he exhaled heavily. Apologizing for disturbing him, Lin En said he heard something from their superior. He asked if it was true that he could locate a delivery target by the target's scent. The turtle still as slowly replied that it was true. The protagonist looked at the turtle, frowning disappointedly. There was purple energy in the protagonist's hand, and he said that the recipient's name was Zio Zio. He said to memorize this scent and remember to deliver his letter as soon as possible. The turtle accepted the envelope from Lin En's hand and agreed. The turtle, shrouded in red energy, slowly turned its neck. A space opened up in the shell. The protagonist got tired of waiting for the turtle's slow movements and snatched the envelope from its mouth. Throwing the envelope inside the shell, he closed it. The turtle slowly turned around. Very slowly approaching the exit, it said that it had to go. Lin En, placing his palm on its face, said it was very slow. Turning to the Beast of Darkness, it said that it knew about their work, and it also knew that it was the fastest courier in the world. The dog suddenly disappeared. It then reappeared in front of the protagonist, holding some sort of object in its teeth. The protagonist reached out his hand toward the beast's mouth. Taking the glittering object in his hand, he exclaimed that it was a meteorite fragment. He asked if he had just made a trip into the darkness. The beast nodded. Lin En, grinning, said that it was indeed fast, and that wasn't bad for the fastest courier. He stroked the beast's head, and the beast wagged its tail contentedly. Suddenly, the main character yelled angrily that he had fractured his skull. He told the beast to be careful when he went somewhere, because if he was killed right at the gate, he would have to pay for his funeral before the letter was even delivered. The beast's paws tightened in surprise. Gritting his teeth, Linen turned around and thought that this pair and the Phoenix chicks couldn't be trusted. It dawned on him, and he thought he'll have to engage them both. The protagonist took the Beast of Darkness and the Rotten Turtle King by the scruff of his neck. Vigorously waving his tools around, he said with an insane smile, "Fusion evolution." After finishing, he laughed ominously. In front of him were a turtle and a Beast of Darkness, merged into one unified creature, which Linen called the Dark Rotting Turtle. He said with a smug smile, "Both the speed of the Darkness Beast and the protection of the Rotten Turtle King's shell were taken into account when crossbreeding, and although the shell would affect the speed of the beast, at least he wouldn't have to worry about them being killed on the way." Placing his hand on the turtle's head, Linen said that it was responsible for protecting the Beast of Darkness in letters. Placing his other hand on the beast's head, he said that it was responsible for delivering the turtle to its destination. Smirking, the protagonist said that he believed that their association would breathe life into the world of delivery. Pointing forward with his palm, he told them to depart. The creature, shrouded in a pink aura, set off ahead. They walked forward along the road. The turtle asked to go slower as the Beast of Darkness hurried her along. Taking the quill in his hand, Linen said, "Now they need to write a letter to the teacher." In the letter, he wrote about how he was bleeding and their store had been trashed by someone. He wrote about how he was sorry for letting him down, but he couldn't help but think of him before he died, and just wanted to know if he was alive. The protagonist wrote about how he was not only a teacher to him, but a father to him, and asked him to burn 3 sticks of incense for him in a year's time. A tear dripped onto the piece of paper. Wiping his eyes, Linen said that he had written such a touching letter that he had cried himself, and the teacher would surely come to his rescue if he read it. He took 2 scrolls in his hand. The protagonist opened them, and they began to glow with pink energy. A large Beast of Darkness and a turtle with a shell covered in spikes appeared in front of him. The beast barked and said that he was his courier, the Beast of Darkness. The turtle began to introduce himself very slowly. Linen, with a sinister smile, took them by the scruff of the neck. He once again began to pick apart over them with his tools. The turtle and the beast were combined into one creature and rushed to deliver the letter. The protagonist waved his hand after them and said that he was counting on them. As they left, the turtle's head turned around. They left the pharmacy, heading along the road. Linen looked after them, hoping it wasn't too late. Under the golden arches, there were many humanoid creatures with a horn on their heads. The eyes of the silhouette that disappeared into the darkness glowed ominously red. The creatures knelt before them. The man in armor raised a glass of red liquid upwards. His hair and skin were white, he was clad in dark gray armor, and he had a black horn on his forehead. He told Titan Death that the fact that he accepted his brother's invitation to come to the meeting flattered him greatly. In front of him was a man with a crazy smile, an elderly man with gray skin and a green mustache, and Zio. The guy with white hair said, today, no matter what, he was grateful in front of them, so he offered a drink in their honor. All 3 of his bones were huge heads with tentacles instead of a body. Numerous creatures carried trays of roasted meat on their heads. They threw the meat into a wooden vessel with a red liquid. The guy in armor told them to make themselves at home and eat first. He poured the purple contents of his glass into his mouth with a smile. Zio also poured the purple liquid into her mouth, looking at it with appetite. She smiled widely with her snow-white teeth, and the servants came to cover their eyes with their hands from their dazzling brilliance. The bright light that illuminated the room was visible even through the windows. The servants squeezed shut, covering themselves with both hands from the bright light. The guy in armor raised his thumb up and said with a smile that he didn't think his niece would become so exquisite and glamorous. One of the creatures said that he had found one doctor and he was able to make his daughter happy. The monster's face was completely insane. The guy in armor asked him if his older brother was in better shape. The monster said that he didn't mean it. He had his head cut off then, and it was his anger and curse that allowed him to exist in this dark world. Laughing madly, he said that he was always thinking about how to kill. The monster with the mustache turned around angrily and said that he didn't lose, and she was the one who brought the curse. The other monster laughed madly in response, and tentacles pulled the skin on its face. Continuing to laugh, it said that he was a useless god who couldn't defeat others, only taking out his anger on his woman. The enraged monster told her to shut up because he would kill her. The servants watched fearfully. The monster with the mustache frowned, and the other monster said that if it weren't for the curse, he would have dried up long ago. The monster with a mustache angrily stabbed his tentacle. His face was grim. The other monster grinned and said that he had lost his mind again. The guy in armor told his brother, sister-in-law, and niece that they could stay with him in peace for a few days, and he, as the younger brother, would pledge to serve them plenty of fresh food every day to keep them in good condition. A tentacle grabbed one of the servants. Zio lifted him above the ground and with a wide smile told him to immediately take out the mirror. The servants obeyed and lifted the mirror above their heads. The servant hanging down his head took the mirror in his hands and pointed it at Zio. Zio looked into the mirror with interest. Looking at her reflection, she smiled widely. The armor guy grinned and said, "It seems like his niece pays too much attention to her teeth." He said if she liked doing them so much, he could get his dentist and make him brush her teeth every day. He looked away sharply. Putting forward a hand shrouded in blue electricity, the guy asked the man. He said that he was really insolent for daring to encroach on his territory. A creature consisting of a beast of darkness and a turtle appeared in front of him. The boy asked what it was. The female monster asked what was going on. The guy in armor was holding a small turtle glowing blue that was fidgeting with its head. He said it was a courier of darkness, and it looked like it was coming to him. He decided to look first and pulled out the envelope with 2 fingers. As he looked at the text of the letter, he exclaimed that this letter was not for him. The guy loudly asked who her name was. Zio surrounded him with tentacles with eyes and said that her name was Zio. The guy smirked and asked if her name was Zio. He turned around with a smile, and Zio said, "Right." The female monster looked at him with her eyes bulging in amazement. The guy asked her if she chose that name herself. She said no. She asked if it was really her daughter's name. Zio was in front of her, flashing a smile. The guy smiled awkwardly, surrounded by her tentacles. Monster woman licked Zio's face and asked if she liked the name. She said that this was what she would call her from now on. The guy frowned, thinking that a top-level monster was given the name of a puppy or a kitten. He wondered who the author of this letter was. Zio looked in the mirror, touching her reflection with her tentacles. The guy told her that this letter was for her. The female monster with a crazy smile asked who wrote it. After scratching the back of her head, the guy said that the author of the letter was called Linen. Zio's eyes sparkled with joy. The guy frowned in bewilderment and asked who this Linen was who was eagerly waiting for his niece. He decided to read the letter. The guy frowned nervously. He asked if she really wanted him to read it. Zio, eyes sparkling with anticipation, asked him to read it soon. The guy made a grimace expressing dislike and started reading. The monsters listened attentively. The guy read, "To dear Zio." Zio cheerfully asked him to continue. The guy, sweating nervously, asked if he should continue. He read, "I am your personal doctor, Linen. Remember me." Zio replied she did. The guy continued reading, "Not long ago, you became our first lifetime client, which makes me feel extremely happy." Pressing his lips together in a nervous smile, he read on, "You are a very friendly and nice girl." The monsters, except for Zio, who was smiling widely, listened, frowning tensely. Trembling, the guy read the next line, "Ever since you left, I have been thinking about you, waiting to meet you day and night, even tossing and turning in my sleep and losing a lot of weight." The servants listened to him with awkward expressions on their faces, one of them covering the other's ears. Zio said with a smile that she too had lost a couple kilograms of weight. The guy with a smirk thought that she was too naive and this guy from the letter didn't lose weight, but was just flirting with her. He decided not to read further since he couldn't be responsible for the consequences. The monsters tensed and looked at him with heavy eyes. The guy frowned and continued reading. "This reminds me again of our wonderful night." The monsters angrily asked him if he wanted to die. The guy trembled in fear, surrounded by tentacles. Fearfully pointing his finger at the letter, he said that's what the letter said. Zio said with an innocent smile that it was indeed a wonderful night. She asked him to continue. The other 2 monsters looked at her in surprise. The monster with a mustache thought about what a happy expression she had on her face. The monster woman thoughtfully said that her daughter had already grown up. They looked at the guy in armor angrily. He fearfully continued reading. "The longing in my heart has become unbearable, and I decided after much thought to write you a letter today." He thought he had written this love letter so that he could read it to his niece, still in front of her parents' eyes. The boy continued, "Because I feel like if I don't do it, I'm going to die." The female monster clenched her jaws angrily. The mustache monster asked what was next. The guy read the next line, "You are like a ray of pale light in my soul. I really can't stop thinking about you." The monster slapped its tentacles on the floor in rage. The servants ran away frightened, surrounded by a cloud of dust. The boy read the last lines of the letter, "So will you accept my offer? I specifically invite you to come to our alley tomorrow. I will prepare a sumptuous lunch for you. Please don't refuse. I miss you. Your personal physician, Dr. Linen." The monster with a mustache opened its eyes in astonishment. The female monster opened her mouth in surprise. The guy silently looked at them waiting for a reaction. The monsters asked if that was it. The guy nervously said yes. Zio joyfully exclaimed that he missed her a lot and had arranged some kind of celebration for her. She took the letter from his hands with her tentacle and left. Everyone looked at her in amazement, and Zio told them that she was going to eat at the feast. Zio left, and everyone silently looked at the exit. The guy wondered in amazement if this was a joke. He thought that he was declaring his intention to kidnap his daughter in front of a top-level ancient god. He wondered who Linen was and if he was really that powerful. Zio's parents looked at him with a gloomy look. Nervously frowning, the boy trembled in fear. Nervously smiling and laughing dryly, he told them that he thought she was old enough to decide what she wanted to do on her own. The mustache monster shouted angrily, waving his tentacles around. Veins swelled on its face. Stone debris began to fall from the ceiling. The mustache monster began to rapidly leave the room. The female monster grabbed his tentacles with her tentacles. The monster with a mustache shouted at her not to stop him. He crashed face first into the wall. The impact shattered the wall of the building. A red moon shone in the night sky above the castle. The ground in front of the castle was dotted with roses. Spider-like monsters appeared above the rose blossoms from the mist. The castle gates slowly opened. One of the monsters ordered to prepare for the third wave of the attack. It ordered Group 21 to get into position and requested the order to attack. The monster's eyes began to glow brightly with red light with a ringing sound. The monster said that the team was authorized and no error was found. The monsters crawled forward and vines covered in thorns appeared above their heads. Underneath the vines lay several monsters, some of which were torn apart. The eyes of one of the monsters glowed purple, and it said, "The remains of members of Teams 1, 3, and 7 have been found, not recommended for recovery. Priority team, immediately need to cross the courtyard and kill Bloodsaw." Vines wriggled on the ground among the dead monsters. The vines rushed forward, attacking the spider-like monsters. One of the monsters that was enveloped by the vines was chopping the vines with its sharp paws. The rest of the monsters continued to advance. The monster said, transmitting information. "We have broken through to the third zone. Distance to target, 500 meters. In front of them was a creature that looked like a doll in the shape of a girl, dressed in a black dress with lace. She had long black hair and held an umbrella in her hand. She looked forward with red eyes. Hordes of monsters shrouded in purple energy were approaching her. One of the monsters said, "Target analysis. Target information is confirmed. Database search. Identity confirmed. One of the most powerful puppets, Black Moon. Combat abilities detected. Warning. The target is extremely dangerous. Launch an attack as soon as possible." The monsters rushed to attack Black Moon, who was enveloped in pink energy. Blood stained the ground. Swinging their sharp limbs, the monsters attacked the puppet. Red threads enveloped one of the monsters, wrapping around its neck. Black Moon lightly grinned without moving from her spot. The monsters around her were wrapped in red threads and repeated the word forward. The monster said, "The doll can't move. There is no strength to break through. The body's work is suspended." Black Moon raised her mechanical hand upward with a clatter, the fingers of which showed red threads. They pulled the threads with a light movement. The scarlet threads squeezed the monster's body, and the monster turned around fearfully. The threads strengthened their grip, and the monster's body burst from the pressure. Shrouded in a red aura, Black Moon continued to move slowly and gracefully as if in a dance. She pulled the threads again, squeezing the monsters even tighter with them. Opening her eyes, she looked to the side. Black Moon swung her hand, and all the monsters around her were torn apart. Among the torn parts of the monsters, the head of one of them, whose eyes were still glowing purple, could be seen. Black Moon bowed gracefully in a curtsy, surrounded by rose petals and monster remains falling from the sky. She approached one of the monsters shrouded in red threads. Black Moon touched the monster's lower jaw with her index finger with a playful smile. Tilting her head, she looked at it with glassy eyes. The monster's face contorted in horror. The last monster fell, and Black Moon, with a face that expressed nothing, said, "All the opponents at the northern gate have been destroyed." New record, 59 seconds. She stood surrounded by dead monsters, and other voices said, "All the enemies on the south side have been destroyed." New record, 3 minutes and 51 seconds. All enemies in the northwest area have been destroyed. Some injuries have been sustained and parts need to be replaced. The fight with the intruders is still ongoing. The system estimates that this fight will take another 5 minutes. The lights were on in the castle tower, and someone asked Black Moon how she got such great performance, and did that engineer replace all her parts. A voice said that she had definitely surpassed her sisters now. Another voice said that Black Moon is very cool, and her speed is faster than theirs. The voice said to stop picking on her because they still have to finish the battle and report back to the mistress. A small rift in space appeared in front of one of the dolls. From the rift, the heads of the main character's courier appeared and said it was a delivery. Shrouded in red energy, they began to fall to the ground and said they had a letter. There were many dolls in the room in the shape of women with a wind-up key on their backs, with red threads tied to their limbs going upwards. Bloodsaw walked over to the work table on which a small doll lay. He struck it with force with his hammer. Her arm was broken in half and her face looked like she was scared. A voice asked if he was still busy. Black Moon, holding an envelope in his hand, said a letter had come for him. Turning around, Bloodsaw asked who the letter was from. Doll's hand touched a white cup standing on a saucer on the table. Taking the cup in her hand, Black Moon said that her girls had found it in the yard and it had been brought by couriers of darkness. She took a leisurely sip from the cup. She said the sender's name was Lin En. Black Moon asked if he knew him. Bloodsaw asked how that was possible. Black Moon asked who he was. Bloodsaw turned to her and said that he adopted him and he was his child. He took the envelope from her hand and pulled out a piece of paper with a letter on it. Bloodsaw read, "I just want to know if you are alive. Your apprentice sent a messenger in his last breath." He exclaimed in astonishment that it was a suicide note. Angrily slamming his huge fist on the floor, Bloodsaw shouted that he would kill these people from the association. Black Moon looked at him in astonishment that was hard to see from her glassy eyes. Bloodsaw thanked her for her welcome and said that he must go now, and if he had the chance he would return to repay her for her help and kindness. Turning around, he began to walk away. Red threads wrapped around his entire body. Turning around, he turned questioningly to the puppet. Black Moon said there were plenty of hunters outside, and his wounds had not yet healed. She asked how she could let him go to certain death. Bloodsaw said he'd rather kill them all himself than sit here and wait to die. Tearing the red threads with his strength, he said he made the Demon Association pay with his blood. Black Moon frowned and said that it was strange, since Bloodsaw had always been known for his calmness. She asked why he was suddenly so furious. Lowering her gaze to the table, she wondered what was in the letter. Black Moon pulled up a piece of paper with red thread. Taking the piece of paper in her hand, she began to read. Frowning, she opened her eyes wide with surprise. Bloodsaw imagined Lin En writing a letter. "This is your disciple, Lin En. I can't survive here, I'm dying. I've lost a lot of blood, my brain is shutting down." He was missing one arm, his eye had fallen out of his eye socket, and his head showed his brain through a hole punched in his skull. Bloodsaw sadly cocked his head upwards. Remembering how he had taught the protagonist how to be a doctor, he recalled the words from his letter. "Master, your student will die soon, but I am thinking of your instructions before I leave. I'm sorry, but I couldn't take care of your store. I let you down, but I can't help but remember you before I die. I just want to know that you live." Lin En and Bloodsaw's imagination dropped the pen and fell face down on the table, continuing the letter. "Remember me. After 1 year, please burn 3 sticks of incense for your disciple." Tears were coming from Lin En's bloodshot eye, and he finished the letter. "It might not be easy for you two right now, but I hope you sincerely miss your disciple, Lin En." Clutching his head, Bloodsaw shouted about how it was all his fault, and he should have sent him to safety much earlier. Waving his fists angrily, he said that the Demon Association had killed his disciple and son today, but he would destroy them tomorrow, or else he wasn't Bloodsaw. Clenching his fists, he walked forward. Black Moon grabbed him with her red threads and asked him to calm down for at least a moment. She said that even if he left here now, it definitely wouldn't solve anything. She said she felt like there was something wrong with that letter. Bloodsaw angrily said that it was his apprentice's handwriting and it couldn't be a forgery. He asked if she thought he wouldn't recognize his own son's handwriting. She shouted at him not to let this letter fool him. She asked if he had ever seen a dying man who wrote so many dots after each sentence. The Bloodsaw stopped, and Black Moon exhaled. Placing her hand on his head, she asked if a man who was literally bleeding to death could write such a tearful letter. She asked him to think with his head. Bloodsaw silently froze in place. The red threads released him and he slowly turned around. Black Moon, frowning sternly, cocked her head at him. She pointed her finger at the ridiculously drawn dead Lin En on the paper. Bloodsaw looked at her, not understanding. He asked if she wanted to tell him that his favorite disciple was just messing with him and there was actually nothing wrong with him. Black Moon told him to take a look at it if he didn't believe her. In her hand was a red round object that looked like an eye. Bloodsaw frowned questioningly. She placed the object in his hand. Bloodsaw looked at the red object in his hand, and Black Moon said that she would guide him into this server and help him find out the truth. The holographic blue circles glowed brightly. Black Moon and Bloodsaw appeared in World 900. Black Moon folded her arms across her chest and said that this was the area of the world that could display the Alley of Wandering Souls, and now she could assure him that his apprentice was safe. Bloodsaw said he thought something had happened to his apprentice after all. She pounded him on the head with her fist and told him to go to the regional channel and see for himself. Bloodsaw pressed a button on the holographic interface. His eyes widened in amazement. People in the chat room were writing in horror about the continued constant appearances of higher-level creatures in their alley, and urging them to either hide from the danger in the basement or leave their homes as soon as possible. Bloodsaw asked what had happened. He said that it seemed to be an invasion of something worse than an association of demons, and they had come specifically to the Alley of Wandering Souls. He tapped his finger on a message offering to find out all the news for 100 skull coins. A dialogue box informed him that he had spent 100 skull coins. Bloodsaw clicked on the holographic interface. A video of a monster wandering through an alley appeared on the screen in front of him. Clenching his fist, he exclaimed that it was his disciple. Black Moon said in astonishment that it couldn't be. Bloodsaw turned around to her and said that he was telling her that his disciple was in trouble. She didn't have time to stop him, and Bloodsaw disappeared. He yelled to his student to hold on because his teacher was coming towards him. A red tentacle touched the face of the sleeping Lin En. The protagonist began to make disgruntled sounds. As he raised himself up without opening his eyes, he told the creature not to move. He held a gun in his hand. Lin En fired, and the tentacle dodged. The protagonist lay back on the pillow face down. Hearing the system alert, he shifted his eyebrows questioningly. You have shot the top-level bounty hunter Zio. Reward, 10 experience points. You have obtained the achievement, Super Brave Man. Reward, 100 base experience. Super Brave Man, a special achievement obtained when you attacked an enemy that is absolutely impossible to defeat. You receive permanent bonuses, Dexterity +5, Intelligence -1, Happiness +10. Waking up, the protagonist got up in bed. Looking out the window, he saw Zio with a smile. There was a smoking gunshot mark in Zio's forehead. Blushing slightly, Zio said, "It's me." The system reported that Lin En's mental state had deteriorated by 20 points. The protagonist took out the bullet from Zio's forehead and apologized to her. Zio, with glittering eyes, asked if it was a greeting. The protagonist with a smile said, "So be it." He stuck a band-aid on her shot spot. Zio smiled widely and asked if her teeth were beautiful. She said that she was taking care of them and had been eating well for a few days. Lin En with a good-natured smile raised his thumb up and said that her teeth were indeed in good condition, but she should eat well. He asked her to go to the courtyard for him to examine her, and then they would have a hearty lunch. Zio agreed with a wide smile. The protagonist's pharmacy was visible through the lens of a telescope. A monster with a mustache was looking through the telescope with its jaws clenched. The guy in armor asked what was going on and if he had found Lin En. The female monster looking through the telescope tube said that this guy was cute but still small. The telescope tube loudly fell to the ground. The female monster looked through the telescope in amazement. The monster with a mustache, waving its tentacles, angrily shouted something about cars. He tore forward and shouted that he was going to kill him. The female monster stopped him by grabbing his tentacles. Frowning, she told him to calm down because they were just socializing. She asked what was wrong with being young, since he wasn't always an adult. The monster with the mustache breathed angrily through his nose. Releasing himself from her grip, he grabbed the telescope. Looking through it, the monster said that he wouldn't dare to even lay a finger on his daughter. Through the telescope, he only saw the pharmacy building. Blazing with anger, he said they entered the building and it looked like the door was blocked and he couldn't see anything. Monster Woman told him not to worry so much, and it's not so bad to eavesdrop because they're not here to fight. They're here for information and they're not doing anything wrong. Clenching his jaws, the mustache monster exhaled forcefully through his nostrils. Turning to the guy in armor, he demanded that he bring a listening device. The guy handed him the apparatus with both hands. The two monsters put their ear to the apparatus, which was glowing with blue energy. They heard Lin En and Zio's conversation. Zio asked if it was really necessary. The protagonist told her not to worry because they were doing a complex procedure that required many different things to be considered. Zio hesitantly said that if you jab deep there, it feels weird. Lin En told her that it wouldn't hurt and he could handle it. He asked if there was discomfort last time. The monster with a mustache furiously bulged his eyes. The female monster told him to calm down because maybe he had it all wrong. They listened to the voices from the machine again. Zio told the protagonist to start if necessary. Lin En said that he was ready to start. He told her not to be nervous and to take a deep breath. The protagonist told her, "Everyone has a first time for everything. A loud sound came from the speaker. Xiao told Linen that he lied and she was in pain because he had reached the most sensitive point. The monster's eyes rolled back in horror. The monster with whiskers began to furiously beat the ground with its tentacles and scattered the trees, ripping them out of the ground with roots. It tore forward, clambering forward. The monster woman gritted her teeth and reached forward with her tentacles. The monster with a mustache told her not to stop him, and he would kill Linen for tricking Xiao and making her do something terrible. Monster woman said it's some kind of misunderstanding because their daughter is just like them and she doesn't have a body. The eavesdropping apparatus fell to the ground. They heard Linen ask Xiao about her no longer feeling pain. He said that he was a very experienced doctor. Xiao replied that there was really no pain. The protagonist told her that he missed one detail. He asked her not to move because he needed to examine her carefully. The monsters listened intently to the conversation from the apparatus on the ground. Xiao asked if it would be troublesome for him. Linen told her not to worry, and he uses the light to take a better look around because it is deep and he can't see anything. The guy in armor grinned nervously and said it's fun. The protagonist climbed the ladder closer to Xiao's ear. Frowning, he raised the lamp in front of him. Seeing the large amount of earwax in his ear, Linen said that it was indeed clogged. He climbed down the stairs with something in his hand. Holding a large brush in his hand, he told her not to worry because he would just clean her ear a few times with a special potion and everything would be fine. The system alerted that Xiao's trust in the protagonist had increased by 1 point. The protagonist poured the liquid into her ear. After sticking the brush into Xiao's ear, he asked how she felt and if he had stuck the wand too deep. Xiao replied with a smile, "Everything is fine." Surrounded by soap bubbles floating in the air, he said he would speed up. Xiao said she felt better and better and something fell out of her ear. The yellow liquid splashed sideways with every movement of the brush. Linen lowered himself to the ground. Tucking one hand behind her back, he asked with a smile if she was feeling better. Xiao cheerfully said that she was starting to hear better. Linen gave a thumbs up with a smile and said that they had just started the treatment and needed to take care of the rest of the body to be completely healthy. The system alerted that Xiao's trust in the protagonist had increased by 20 points. Xiao looked at the protagonist with a wide smile, and Linen suggested to continue. The monsters silently looked at the listening apparatus. Xiao's voice said about brushing his upper and lower jaws. The protagonist was brushing Xiao's teeth with a toothbrush. The monsters listened in amazement as Xiao talked about how her cheeks were swollen and her whole face was slippery. Holding a huge piece of cloth in his hands, Linen said that it was to nourish her skin and beauty. He asked her to be careful and smooth it out a bit. The monster's face turned into an expression of pure shock. Linen smilingly cleaned Xiao's face with a sponge. The monster with a mustache was breathing heavily while listening to this. The female monster with a gloomy face said that her daughter was already so mature. The armor guy said that it had been over 2 hours, and this Linen was truly amazing. The system alerted that the one-horned ghost king's admiration for Linen had increased by 230 points. He received the achievement, King's Favor, base experience plus 200. King's Favor, a special achievement that puts you on the same level as the king. Your appearance in society will now elicit deep admiration and favor from other beings. Your permanent reward, all inventory plus 10, charm plus 1. After applying the cucumber mask on Xiao's face, Linen raised his head questioningly. Someone was walking down the Wandering Soul Alley. In front of him was a signboard, the Bloodsaw Pharmacy. The man looked at the signboard, lifting his head up. He had dark short hair, half of his face covered in metal. The man frowned and then walked forward. Behind him was a monster covered in huge eyes. The monster had many mouths that were even over its eyes. A creaking sound could be heard around the man. With a smirk, he said that he had finally arrived. He said that he hoped that this Linen hadn't escaped yet, otherwise he would be very bored here. The man opened his eyes wide. Surrounded by spider-like monsters, he shouted that once he caught him, he would cut him into pieces, send him to his lab and let him be used for research. The man said thanks to him, he would be able to research the most powerful biological weapon ever, and he should be happy that he, the vice president, had personally come to rip his head off. He told him not to worry because he would handle his corpse with care. The vice president laughed maniacally. Meanwhile, Linen was wiping Xiao's face with a cloth. The dialogue box said, "You have launched a special mission, save your body. Introduction, try to save yourself. If you die, at least try to keep your body in the best condition possible. Reward, 5 skull coins, 3000 base experience, 1 special reward. Reward for preserving your body, 50 skull coins, titanium alloy coffin, 5 grave wreaths, Good costume. The protagonist turned around questioningly. Frowning, he wondered if someone had come. After imagining him lying in a coffin, Linen said that this system was disgusting, and even prepared a coffin for him. He asked if that meant that even the system didn't believe that he would survive. He rejoiced that he had already thought of a defense plan. Linen asked Zio if she felt like eating. Flashing her teeth, she asked if he had food. With a thumbs up, the protagonist said with a smile that he had ordered takeout food and it had already been delivered. He said he was confident that his treats would be able to please her. The vice president walked, surrounded by monsters. He raised his palm upwards in greeting. In the fog, the silhouette of a man in a medical gown could be seen. Linen stared forward, frowning. Bowing, he greeted the man and said that he had been waiting to meet him for a long time. The vice president asked if he had really said they were coming. He asked why the man didn't run away. The protagonist said with a sinister grin that he wished he could ask him the same question, because he knew he was here, but he dared to come anyway. On the dialogue box, it said, "Attention. The current danger level has been increased to the highest level." In addition to the high-level creatures, a large number of dolls that were biological weapons of the Demon Association had reappeared. The various monsters turned around fearfully and raised their gaze upwards. On the screen was a man surrounded by monsters. The man in the chat room exclaimed that he recognized the symbolism of the Demon Association. Linen was also visible on the screen, standing with a tense smirk. Someone in the chat room asked what that stupid student from Bloodsaw Pharmacy was doing, and if he was too cocky since he went against the association. The people in the chat didn't understand why he had the courage to oppose the association, but they admired him. The one-horned ghost king, looking through the telescope, said that he felt like there were quite a few of these puppets from the Demon Association now, and it seemed like they were just looking to meet this person. They all looked through the telescopes, and the female monster asked if he was in danger now. The monster with the mustache exclaimed that the association had come just for him. The one-horned king said it was strange because it was as if this guy knew they were coming and had been waiting in advance. It dawned on him, and he asked if that meant he had his niece come back to his apothecary to deal with the Demon Association. And that was the dinner he was talking about in his letter. He saw through the telescope Zio, who was looking out between the buildings with a smile. Raising one eyebrow, the one-horned king said, "Of course." The vice president said he felt like he knew they would come back. Linen replied, "After all, he killed all of their puppets, and until their Demon Association admits defeat, they certainly won't leave him alone." The man said that he was pretending to be a daredevil. He asked if he thought he could defeat them. The system warned that the danger level had been raised to 99%. The protagonist with a calm face said he wasn't sure of anything. The vice president asked with a smirk, "Then he's here." The system warned that the danger level had been raised to 100%. The wind fluttered the white robe of the protagonist. He replied, "Same as you," pretending to be cool. The man looked at him, frowning silently. The monsters in the crowd watched in amazement. The vice president clenched his fist. Gritting his teeth, he asked how dare he say such a thing. He said it was untrue, an obvious provocation, and it must be a conspiracy against him. Linen said that his teacher had once told him that if someone was faced with an insoluble situation and was wondering how to proceed, the worst thing he could do was to retreat, and then victory could be forgotten. Pointing his index finger at the man, he said with a smile that now that they had 3 bombs and 2 kings in their hands, they should tease each other until the very end. Otherwise they wouldn't be able to lay out a good card combination. Linen asked with a crazy smile how they could afford to do that. He asked with a confident smile what his parents would say. The man gritted his teeth. The crowd watched the main character through a huge screen. The monster-looking man said that his opponent was an association of demons. He asked if he was looking for death. The rooster-like monster said that he couldn't believe that they had such a brave man living in Wandering Souls Alley. The pig-like monster asked if this person was always so arrogant. Linen, yawning, said he was bored because he brought so many people and doesn't make a single move. He said that since nothing is happening, he will go back to bed. The system reported that Linen's popularity on Wandering Souls Lane had increased by 3 points. The man clenched his jaws irritably and exclaimed that he was teasing him. He asked how dare he act so arrogant in front of him. The dialogue box read, "Demon's anger plus 20. The demon has been successfully angered by your pretense." Pointing a finger at the protagonist, the man asked if he didn't have powers, and if he wasn't pretending to be happy. He ordered the puppets to activate the top-level biological weapons and turn on battle mode because he wants them to crush him overnight. The monster covered in eyes was enveloped in red energy. The monster said, "Combat mode activated. The highest response team is in effect. Biological weapon operation activated. Target locked on." Combat hunting activated. Focusing pupil open. Evil corridor open. Initiate hunt. The monsters rushed to attack the protagonist. The man asked if he thought his courage would save his life. He said that his level 3 puppets were the best fighting weapons in this world, and the bloody evil spirits would destroy them all. Laughing evilly, the man shouted that even top-level monsters were not ways to break him. A flash of red energy struck the ground. A smiling Zio appeared in front of the monsters. Explosions rang out, tearing the monsters apart. The monsters' eyes fell to the ground. One of them, falling next to the man, twitched. The man opened his mouth wide in shock. Zio stood, surrounded by the spider-like monsters. Rubbing his nose with his finger, Linen apologized and said that he didn't hear. He asked what he had just said. Looking at the screen, a monster exclaimed, "How was that possible?" Another monster asked if it was possible that the monster who came to their alleyway had only come to meet Linen. System alert. The fear of the hunter, scavenger, and blood monster before you is +10. You have successfully unlocked the achievement, Spreading Fear. Reward, 200 base experience. Fear Spreading, a special achievement that can be obtained when you become feared by over 1,000 creatures. You have successfully taken another confident step towards the monsters. You have gained the permanent bonuses, All Inventory +5, Fear of Monsters +1, Speed +10. Zio said with a smile that there was so much delicious meat here that she couldn't stand it. The protagonist told her not to worry because no one will take it away from her. Zio and the monsters ran towards each other in an attack. The man said that this is the highest level. He asked how this was possible. The system alerted that the powerful demon's fear of Linen had increased by 10 points. The protagonist picked up the monster's eye from the ground. He asked with a sinister smirk, if he wasn't a professional at his craft, would he be able to do such complicated things? Holding the 2 monster eyes in his hands, Linen said that he had already said that he had 2 3-bomb kings in his pocket, and he couldn't believe that they still hadn't escaped from here. The dialogue box says, "Congratulations on getting the achievement, Power of Pretending." Reward, 200 base experience. Power of Pretense, a special achievement that can only be obtained if you successfully scare an opponent who is stronger than you. You are rewarded with Intelligence +3, Popularity +5. Zio devoured the monster's body. The monster said, analyzing the target. Enemy level. Highest level of danger. Unable to resist. Unable to start hunting. Zio licked her lips and said that it was delicious. Monster said, Combat win probability analysis, 0%. Absorption success analysis, 0%. It is recommended to flee immediately. The man watched silently with his mouth open. The monster said to run immediately. Turning around, the man ordered to run. He started running and the spider-like monsters soon followed him, turning around frightened. The protagonist told Zio to eat as much as she wanted, and if she didn't have enough, he would show her another place to eat. Licking her lips, Zio agreed. Flashing her sharp teeth, she ran after the fleeing monsters. She grabbed several of them with her tentacles. The monster watched fearfully as she slowly brought it to her mouth. Zio took a bite of the monster. Throwing the monsters into her mouth, she said that other than the meat, it had a metallic flavor to it, and it was very tasty. The system alerted that Zio had eaten the other monsters, and her favor for Linen increased by 2 points. The monsters watched what was happening on the screen. One of the monsters exclaimed that he had witnessed a top-level monster devouring monsters and he was shocked. Another said that he understood, and this bounty hunter was summoned by Linen. He exclaimed while pointing his finger at the screen. Raising one eyebrow, the monster asked if they remembered how 3 bounty hunters had recently eaten several creatures in their area. The other monster replied that he remembered that many were eaten, but only their alley of wandering souls remained untouched. The other monster exclaimed in surprise, was it possible that they had only survived because of him? Linen on the screen was telling Zio to take his time and eat slowly. Frowning, the protagonist said that these creatures were running very fast. He asked if they couldn't just wait to be eaten. Zio grabbed him with her tentacle and planted it on her head. She sped up and told him to hold on to her. Pushing off the ground with her tentacles, Zio leaped forward. She landed among the crowd of monsters and quickly put the monsters in her mouth. Quickly running along the road, she ate all the monsters she could find. Looking at the screen, one of the monsters exclaimed that this creepy top-level monster was just offering him a ride for nothing. Another monster asked what kind of relationship they had. He exclaimed that they couldn't be friends. The monster dressed in armor said that he was the first person in history who dared to ride on the head of a top-level monster. Another monster said that he was a knight on a monster and now he was definitely a legend.